Hello, my name is Sarah Durham and I'm an attorney with Blizzard and Zimmerman. My practice area focuses on criminal law, specifically direct appeals and post-conviction writs of habeas corpus. You've probably seen that meme that shows two versions of success. What most people think of success, which is that straight arrow that looks just like a normal arrow on a steady trajectory towards success. And then there's the other version that shows what looks kind of like an arrow at the beginning and the end, but the middle is utter chaos. You know, I understand that arrow and I think that I've lived that arrow actually. I was born and raised in North Central Texas, mostly in Decatur, Texas, and when I tell people I'm from Decatur, I get usually one of two responses. Either, where's that? Or, oh yeah, I drove through there once. So yeah, 287 goes right through the middle of it, so a lot of people just drive through. But Decatur, you know, it's just one of those places, like small town Texas at its finest, and it will always be special to me. But now I call Anchorage, Alaska home, which is a long way from Decatur, Texas, and I'll talk to you more about that, you know, in a second. On a recent trip to Texas, my husband and my kids and I were going through some of my memory lane kind of stuff, you know, old report cards, schoolwork, those kinds of things. And we came across a packet, I think it was like second or third grade packet, where I had written, it was an about me packet. And I wrote that I loved pizza, the color green, both of which are still true, and that I wanted to be a judge when I grew up. You know, it's really no wonder that I wanted to be a judge when I grew up. I did grow up in a Christian home and a law enforcement home. My dad was a state trooper. My mom worked for the county attorney's office. I don't think it's far-fetched to describe my upbringing as one with a strong sense of justice, of right and wrong. My parents were, you know, really instilled that in my brother and me. But my first career was not law. I was a high school English teacher for 8 years. And during my years in the classroom, I of course wanted my students to learn about and love literature like I did, and I wanted them to be able to write better, or at least appreciate better writing when they left my classroom. But beyond that, you know, I really wanted my class to be a bright moment in their day. A place where they could come, they'd be greeted with a smile, they would be made to endure some corny sarcasm, some corny jokes. That's just who I am. But that they knew that they were, you know, encouraged and that they were in a safe place. And in hindsight, I think I did achieve that most of the time. At the end of my 8th year, though, I really found myself just unhappy, not enjoying my work. And after talking it over with my husband and my kiddos and praying about it, I decided to go to law school. I attended UNT Dallas College of Law, and if that sounds familiar, Dex Pischel, one of my colleagues at Blizzard and Zimmerman, also attended there. You know, UNT is a school that prides itself on a non-traditional approach to law, placing, you know, the practical over the theoretical. Any student there who seeks opportunities will find them. And that was true for me too. I went through, you know, I had a lot of internships and clerkships at various courts and with the Department of Labor that were just invaluable experiences to me. And if you want to learn or know more or read more about those, that can be found in my written bio. But back to Dax for just a second. At UNT, he and I were founding officers of the Christian Legal Society there, the chapter at UNT. It's a national organization comprised of Christian law students and practitioners, and that group, Dax included, just really helped me stay focused in school and remember that God and not me was in control. As a wife and a mother of 3 kiddos, who was commuting hours a day and keeping up with law school demands, I lost sight of that sometimes. And Dax and that group really helped me to kind of maintain perspective and focus. And then after graduation, Dax got a job at Blizzard and Zimmerman first, and then he approached me and said, you know, would you be interested in an appellate position with the firm? And I said, yeah, of course. And I interviewed with Jacob and Matt, and they were willing to hire a remote attorney. I kind of like to say that Blizzard and Zimmerman encouraged remote working before remote working was cool, right? But since being hired, I've worked from my home in Anchorage, Alaska. You know, modern technology is amazing. I come back to Texas every few months or as my schedule demands or requires. The reason we're in Anchorage, Alaska, it's my husband's company is headquartered here, and during law school and before, he traveled kind of all over to different regions for weeks at a time, and we were actually presented with the opportunity for him to stay home all the time we just had to move to Anchorage, Alaska. So we actually love it up here and we're happy to be here. So that's what we did. But like I said, remote working works with my position as an appellate attorney because that's what I do. I review cases, I research, and I write appeals and writs. I work closely with other attorneys in the firm, of course. Jacob and I often conduct consultations together. We collaborate on a variety of different kinds of briefs. And he's a board certified criminal attorney and appellate attorney. He makes for a knowledgeable and effective teacher. So there's a lot of collaboration and teamwork that goes on at Blizzard and Zimmerman. And I think each of the attorneys has their own strengths, and we're all kind of willing to share it with one another, which fosters, a smart, efficient law practice. One day, Matt and I were talking about an appeal we were collaborating on, and I had done some research and we were talking about issues and that kind of thing, but that day Matt had a crazy schedule. He had several meetings, he had a hearing that he had to get to, and we just kind of talked about that. Like at that moment we said, okay, one of the advantages of having me, a remote attorney, to write appeals and do the research and that kind of thing is because I have the luxury of focus, we called it, and I think that is so true. I might engage in phone consultations and Zoom meetings now and again, but for the most part, I have the ability to block off hours at a time to focus on research and writing. Again, I just have the luxury of focus as a remote worker. So, when I consult with prospective clients or when I speak to current clients, I draw somewhat from those teaching days. And one of my goals is to provide a bright moment in that client's day. And that might just be as simple as, talking through the same issue a few times just to make sure they understand, or listening to, their story, or, again, their questions for maybe longer than logically necessary, but it's important to them. I want to be proactive rather than reactive. So I will email or I will call just to say, hey, I've been, thinking about your case. I'm working on it. Just know maybe nothing has changed, but I'm thinking about it and I'm working on it. And I just want you to know that. Being an attorney and a criminal defense attorney at that, my news to clients is not always happy. Our conversations are often heavy about heavy topics. But I want my clients to know that I work hard for them and I will keep them in the loop and update it as often as I can. So you can see how my path to my current position as an attorney with Blizzard and Zimmerman, which I do define as success, definitely kind of mirrors that second arrow. It was not a straight, sure, steady trajectory, but I really do believe that just because life gets a little chaotic, it doesn't mean good things aren't happening or can't happen. So, I really enjoy being an attorney at Blizzard and Zimmerman, and I look forward to what the future holds.